guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree if you are new here, and I've changed how I do my base makeup again. So I figured I would film a video and show you guys my updated base routine. So if you guys want to hang out and see how I do my base routine, so it's fully set but it's still a little bit luminous and it's blurred and it lasts really well throughout the day, then just keep on watching. Okay, so no matter what, my very first step is always SPF. Always, always, always. It doesn't matter if I'm doing quick makeup, it doesn't matter if I'm doing a full glam, always SPF. Typically, what I will do is I will put on my SPF and then I will go do my eyeshadow. So my SPF has a little bit of time to sink into my skin, and then I will go in and do my base. Sometimes if I'm doing like more quick makeup where I know I'm not really going to be putting anything on my eyes except for maybe a quick wing at the very end or something like that, I will just put on my SPF and like then get dressed and like quickly do my hair or whatever, just something to again let that sink into my skin. The biggest thing is just making sure that it has a minute to just like really sink in. I use the e.l.f. Sun Touchable Whoa Glow SPF, so it does add a level of luminosity. So my goals with SPF are first and foremost sun protection, obviously. I like something that is glowy, and then also it adds an extra level of luminosity to my skin. I do have normal to dry skin, acne prone skin. I have acne scarring as well. So these are all things that I keep in mind while doing my base. First things first, I'm gonna take a spray. This is the NYX Bear With Me Prime and Spray. Prime and Set, whatever. I'm just gonna spray that onto my face. I just like to, again, you're gonna notice a theme here. A lot of things that I'm gonna do are to build up small layers of hydration and build up small layers of coverage. And then I'm just gonna let that sink in. For my primer, I'm going to use the e.l.f. Liquid Poreless Putty Primer. This is one of my favorite primers. And as you can see, I am blending just a thin amount of that underneath my eyes as well. I'm not going to go too crazy with it under there though. But as you can see, that did kind of dull down some of that luminosity. It's still there. It's just almost like more of an underglow now than it is just like an in-your-face luminosity. But that primer is a little bit mattifying, but like not crazy, a little bit blurring. It's a little tacky. It's just like a really, really nice primer that's also like not too heavy. Like I don't feel it on my skin. This step is probably completely unnecessary, but I do it anyway. I'm gonna take the Auric Glow Lust and put just a little bit of this underneath my eyes. And just take a sponge and blend it in. I'm not like really going for like perfection here or anything like that, just kind of loosely blending it in. And what this is gonna do for me is a little bit of hydration, a little bit of luminosity, which the luminosity reflection against my under eyes is going to start to cancel out like my dark circles. So it's just gonna kind of bounce that light away. Auric Glow Lust, Halo, e.l.f. Halo Glow, stuff like that also has just a touch of coverage too, so it's going to start correcting my under eyes. And then next up, I'm gonna take a concealer that I absolutely do not like underneath my eyes, so I relegated over to a spot concealer. And I'm just going to dot it in the couple of places that I want just a little bit of extra coverage. I always put a little bit right here as well. And then I'm gonna let that sit. I'm gonna jump over to my Makeup Revolution Eye Bright Corrector. And I'm gonna take a brush. This is not the ideal brush for it, but it's the brush that I currently have. And I'm just going to blend this underneath my eyes. And this is just going to correct my dark circles. It's also very luminous. You can see a massive difference between my two under eyes right now. I'm not picking up a ton. I'm just like barely patting into here. This brush just happens to pick up a little bit more than normal, but that's okay. This brush actually does a really good job for this. It's just bigger than I'm used to for doing this, so it's a little bit of a learning curve. And then I'm actually just gonna grab that same brush that I used to blend out the Glow Lust, and I'm just going to blend in this concealer. As you can see, it's not doing a perfect job. I don't expect perfection here. First of all, that concealer isn't like incredibly high coverage, and I'm not doing like pinpoint spot concealing where I put just like the tiniest dot on there and then I like barely blend it in so that the coverage is like maxed right there. That's not what I'm going for. I'm just going for thin layers of additional coverage. That's the biggest thing, it's just really thin layers. With that being said, when I say thin layers, you still want to make sure you're putting on enough that it lasts on your skin. If you put on, say, foundation or concealer, or maybe you just use concealer on your face and that's it, and you notice that kind of throughout the day your skin is just kind of like absorbing it and just like it's just disappearing, it's because you're not using enough. There's a very fine line between not using enough and it just kind of vanishes into thin air throughout the day versus using too much and then it looks cakey. Very thin line that you kind of just have to experiment with your skin and your products and stuff like that, but it's there. It's like a, I don't know how else to explain it, but like it's possible. Like you can wear enough makeup that it stays in place and it stays looking good all day long while also not having it like caked on. So for foundation, I'm going to use the A2O Lab Soft Matte Foundation. I get this from Shop Miss A. It is one of their house brands. This is a $4 foundation, but it is such a beautiful foundation. So I'm going to literally take one pump and I'm going to dot, dot, dot. And then I always end up putting on a little bit too much on my cheeks. So I kind of just grab from there, just spread it around, literally just kind of loosely beginning to move this product around, and then whatever else I have on my finger I'll just kind of wipe off. But that should be enough. Should be. I may build it up a little bit, but it should be enough. And then I'm going to take a damp sponge. I'm just going to start bouncing this in. Look at how beautiful that foundation is. This is a, I would say probably medium to full coverage foundation, which is why I can get away with using less, and it's also a very creamy foundation, so it does spread very easily. And here's the other thing too. Granted, it took me years to get to this point, and I will admit that my skin looks significantly better than it did 4 years ago. I was on birth control for like 12 years, and then I got off birth control because I just needed to not be on birth control anymore. And I went from never really having acne as a kid to having like full-blown prepubescent acne at the age of like 25, 26. It was not a good time. It was not fun. That's a lot of what my acne scarring is from that period of time. I have now reached a point where I like a nice solid base. Like I like to have foundation on. I like to put on a little bit of spot concealing. I like to even everything out. But as you can see, my acne is still visible. My freckle is still visible. I don't need such high coverage foundation that my face loses all of its like dimension and like spots and stuff like that. I'm okay with having a little bit of it peek through. I like to just kind of even out the undertone of it all. And then for concealer, I'm gonna use the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer. This is a very high coverage concealer, so I'm just going to use the smallest little dot on my inner corner and then another small dot on my outer corner, and I'm not re-dipping here. I'm gonna put a little bit on the center of my nose, a little bit on my chin, and a little bit on my forehead. And these right here are not for concealing purposes, it's more for adding dimension to my face. Because as you can see, it is much lighter than my foundation, so it's gonna add that kind of dimension, especially once I get in with like bronzer. It's going to just add dimension. I'm gonna let this sit for a second while I drink some coffee. I'm gonna take the not flat side of my sponge, and usually what I do is I start with my chin, my nose, my forehead, and then that way there's enough product in the sponge that it's not gonna pick up a ton from underneath my eyes. And I can recognize that up until about this point, through this point, this is identical to every other base routine that I've ever done. And it's likely identical to pretty much every other base routine, I mean, that most people do. It's the steps after this is where I started to change things. But I always get new, new subscribers, new people who stumble across my videos, so I figured I might as well do the whole thing, There are always people looking to learn how to do makeup, so I try to do as much of it as possible in one video. And I always make sure to take a little bit of that concealer right into the kind of nose bridge area. So I always start just kind of pressing it in, I'll take it down, I'll take it out, and just kind of keep working it back and forth. And then eventually go pick up what's over here, dragging it back this way, dragging it out, taking it down a little bit, just kind of slowly moving it around to where I want it to be while also blending it out. And as you can see, because I built up those thin layers underneath my eyes with just a little bit more coverage and a little bit more coverage, while yes, I did use a very bright concealer, it's not so bright that it is like a stark contrast. It kind of blends together, it brightens, but it still looks seamless. Okay, next up is cream bronzer and cream blush. I'm gonna use the Milani Cheek Kiss Cream Bronzer in the shade Hey Honey, and I'm gonna apply it with a velour puff. So first things first, I'm gonna fold it in half like a little taco, and I'm gonna pick up literally the tiniest amount. I'm gonna put a little bit on the sides of my nose, and also take it up into this bridge space to kind of contour. And don't forget too, if you go too heavy-handed with this step, you can always go back in with your sponge, with whatever product is still on it, and easily clean it up. Just kind of add a little bit of shape to my nose, and then one last little bit underneath my lip to make my lip look pouty. And then I'm gonna unfold it, pick up just a little bit, and I'm gonna start bronzing. I personally do not put bronzer on my cheeks anymore. I find that layering together, this cat is screaming. I find that trying to layer together bronzer, blush, and highlight all on just like this portion of my cheeks, it just looks a little muddy. It just looks like a little bit too much. So I take my bronzer into my temple, and that's about it. And now that's not to say that I don't have days where I actually just don't wear blush and I just put bronzer on my cheeks if I'm going for like a really, really bronzy look. Absolutely. But it's always one or the other, never all of them. And now, however, if you find that you like all of them together, by all means. By all means. I just don't like the way that it looks on my face anymore. Okay, now see, I kind of over blended this in the middle just a little bit. So I'm going to take my sponge and just kind of bounce this through the center just to kind of push that bronzer back just a little bit. And then I'm gonna go in with cream blush, and I'm gonna use the About Face Cheek Freak in Quickie. And I'm just gonna flip my velour puff over and use the other side, pick a little bit up, and I'm gonna start out at the back of my cheekbones and kind of blend it up into my temple where those two will kind of blend together and meet. This blush is a lot more like kind of sheer, almost blush balmy, so I do kind of go back and pick up a little bit more and then continue blending it out, but focusing the majority of the pigment right back here and then slowly spreading it out and up. And I do take this up pretty high into my under eye as well. I just feel like it kind of makes everything just blend together. And then I'm going to take the tiniest amount and put it on the tip of my nose. I know there was like a period of time where I was just like, oh, I like put it over the bridge of my nose during the summer and like on the tip of my nose during the winter, and then I stopped doing it all together for a little while, and now I'm just kind of back on the tip of the nose. I don't know. It fluctuates where I put it on my nose. You don't have to put it on your nose at all. Whatever makes your heart happy. Before I do anything else, I'm gonna take my spray again and I'm gonna douse my face. That is, again, going to add a ton of hydration to the skin, and it just makes everything set down so nicely. Okay, and then obviously biggest thing here is you have to make sure that that spray that you just sprayed on your face is completely sunken in. It's absorbed. It has evaporated. It is in your skin. It's not wet. I can still feel it on this side of my face when I fan it. So just making sure that everything, like there's no additional wetness on your face. And now, this is where I am going to start completely deviating from how I used to do my makeup. Now is the part where I have changed it. So previously, what I would do is I would take my powder bronzer and my powder blush and I would set it down now. So that way they were like really nice and intense. And then I would go in and I would set my face around that and then, you know, finish up the rest of my face, right? Put a little blush topper, a little highlight, whatever. We'll do all of that together. I would also use brushes for that entire process. At some point, I stopped liking the way that my powder foundation was looking with brushes. So I started using velour puffs, and I'm going to show you guys that. And at another point, I started kind of looking back, particularly at YouTube thumbnails of my own, and being like, the blush was a little heavy. So I've kind of, again, I've tweaked and I've played around. So first things first, before I do anything else, I'm going to grab my sponge one more time, and I'm going to take this up the sides of my nose and then just underneath my eyes one more time, just to make sure that in the period of time between me applying my concealer and now, I haven't developed any creasing. And then I'm going to take the Makeup Revolution Conceal and Define Powder Foundation and a new velour puff. I'm going to start out with the pointed side, and I'm just going to pick up just a little bit, and I'm going to start at my very inner corner. Much like I do with applying concealer, I start at my inner corner and then I slowly kind of spread it down and out. This cat will not stop screaming, oh my god. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit more, and in this process I'm also getting, just because it's easier with the corner, I'm going to get here and the sides of my nose. Look at how fucking smooth that looks. I want just like a little bit more right up underneath my eye. But I feel like I have so much more control with how much I'm applying, and it just, it almost like it's just airbrushed on. Like, that is so smooth looking compared to this side. So doing the same thing, just kind of slowly pressing this in. I'm not swiping or anything like that. I'm literally just pressing it into my skin. Taking it on the side, getting in that little corner, foldy section. Okay, and as you can see, it kind of starts to get into my blush a little bit, but I'm not too worried about that. And then I'm going to take just the tiniest amount of this, again, because I like how brightening it is, but also the size of the applicator is probably a playing factor here. And I'm going to take this down the center of my nose, between my eyebrows, and I'm also going to just quickly pat this over my eyebrows. And then with like nothing else left on this, I'm just going to press whatever might be left on my velour puff over where I put this cream bronzer, just to kind of set down that space. Okay, so this is where things start to get a little bit funky. So I'm gonna set down over like the apples of my cheeks and over my blush. And I prefer to do this with like a blurring, I'm just gonna ignore her. I prefer to do this with like a blurring but not super pigmented powder. So I like something like the e.l.f. Prime and Stay Finishing Powder. It's very sheer, but it has just like the tiniest bit of color, but it's also very blurring. She just went back out there to continue yelling. I don't know what to do. I have tried to do this with a velour puff and I don't like the way that it looks. Something about this powder in particular, I'm not a fan of it. So I'm gonna take a brush, pick up just a little bit, and I'm gonna start on the apples of my cheeks and then slowly pull this powder back. So I'm not putting a ton on like where I had put that cream blush. I'm not, you know, caking it on or anything. My goal here is not to cover where I had put that cream blush, but just set down that space. So as you can see, it does wash it out a little bit. There's a little bit of coverage, a little bit of something there. You can see that it's still visible, but compared, it's definitely washed out a little bit. I'm not worried about that. We're gonna go back in with a powder blush, but I was just finding that setting down that powder blush, setting down the cream blush with powder blush was just, it was too tacky and it was just making it all be a little bit too much. This is just going to blur out my like pore area and set down that space with like a sheer amount of powder, so it just is gonna, it'll look nice. And then last but not least, I'm gonna set down most of the rest of my face. I am gonna skip where the bronzer is, but rather than bouncing back and forth, I just started setting my forehead before putting on the powder bronzer, because the way I was doing it before is I was setting down the powder bronzer with bronzer, or setting down the cream bronzer with powder bronzer, and then going back in and setting the center of my forehead, and then having to go back in with the bronzer to like blend the line together. And I was like, why not just, you know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna take the bigger side of the velour puff, and I'm using the Flower Beauty Light Illusion Powder Foundation. And I'm just going to press this into the open spaces. I do take it up a little bit onto the apples of my cheeks, but I don't take it over to where the blush is. And I just kind of take this right underneath the blush. Sometimes if it creates like a harsh line, I will kind of pat it up into it, but like not too much. The only thing I know about myself is that my chin is the oiliest part of my face, and throughout the day, it will break down the powders and then get super shiny. So I always put on just like a little bit of extra powder for a little bit of extra reinforcement. So I'm just patting this onto the center of my forehead, and I'm not going over where the bronzer is. So as you can, it looks a little weird at the moment because the center of my forehead is matte, and then like out here is shiny. All right, so I'm gonna grab my powder bronzer. I'm gonna use the ColourPop Pressed Powder Bronzer in Avila Beach. It's like a fluffy brush, not picking up a ton. And again, I'm just pressing this into my skin. I'm not sweeping or swiping because this is an unset portion of my face, so I don't want to disturb what's underneath it. And then I'll kind of do a little bit of a sweeping motion when I meet where the powder foundation is. And then it really depends on my mood, to be honest with you, as to whether or not I'm gonna get like super precise with my nose. I really don't feel like being super precise with my nose today. Sometimes I will use like a much more precise brush, but I don't feel like it today. Just to kind of intensify where that bronzer was. Now that my whole face is set and it's just kind of, you know, intensifying blush and, you know, adding glow and stuff like that, I'm gonna jump off really quick and finish up my under eyes. I will be right back. Okay, next up, I'm gonna take a little bit of matte blush, just a little bit, to just kind of add more. I'm gonna use the LA Girl Just Blushing Blush in Just Natural. And I am being careful to not like overly disturb what's going on underneath, kind of using more patting motions than anything, because I didn't cake on powder here, so it's not perfectly set. I'm just kind of re-intensifying that blush to get it honestly back to where it looked before I put powder there, not more, which is how it looked before. It was too much before. Don't get me wrong, there is a time and a place for like a really heavily blush look, but I was doing it every day and it was just like a little too much, you know? Next up, I'm going to take the exact same brush and I'm going to go in with the Milani Baked Blush in Luminoso. And this is where the blush is going to get intensified a little bit more and it's going to add a little bit of glow. Could I technically skip the matte blush and probably just go in with some of these like blush toppers that I have and have it be slightly less intense? Yes. But A, I have a lot of matte blushes that I need to use, and B, I do still like to be blushy. I just needed it toned down from where it was. Okay, I'm actually gonna skip this step today just because I don't feel like I want it, but in some cases I will take something like the Physicians Formula Butter Glow powder, which I will swatch for you guys, which is just like a very sheer, no coverage, just like a little, you can barely even see it on my skin, but it's just like just a little bit of like very sheer, very soft glow. Sometimes I will put that a little bit on my foreheads. Sometimes I'll actually use it on the apples of my cheeks if I need to soften up the blush a little bit further. Just, it kind of almost makes my skin look a little bit more like skin. I do avoid it on my chin just because, like I said, my chin gets the oiliest the fastest. So it will, I won't need that in a couple hours, but sometimes I wear it, sometimes I don't. Today I don't feel like it. So next up, I'm going to go in with a little bit of highlight. I have the Wet n Wild Mega Glow Highlight in Bloom Time for today. And I'm going to start out with my inner corners, which isn't technically part of my base, but I always like to make my inner corner highlight match the highlight that I put on the rest of my face. And then before I do my cheeks, I'm going to take a little bit on my finger and put it on my Cupid's bow, and then whatever's left on my finger after I've blended that in, I'll put that on the tip of my nose and just blend it up. And then I like to take a big fluffy brush and pick up a little bit, and I start with this on the apples of my cheeks. That's going to, I don't know, it's just a little bit more youthful, I feel, than putting it up here, but I'm going to put it on the apples of my cheeks. It's going to look really youthful. It's also going to soften that blend between the blush and my skin tone, and then I'll just kind of drag whatever is left on the brush back and then up onto my brow bone, which isn't a ton, so sometimes I'll pick up a little bit more and put a little bit more up there. Just like a little bit of like a little bit of glow on the apples of my cheeks. Okay, and then really the only other thing that I do for my base is sprays. So after I have done all of my powders, but before I go finish up the rest of my eyes, is I will take the Morphe Continuous Setting Mist and I will once again douse my face. But I'm serious when I say douse my face. And what that's going to do is that's going to melt all of those powders down into one just like really soft, just fully set, but just very skin-like finish once this all dries down. And then once I'm done with all of my makeup, I use 2 different setting sprays because I'm extra. I mean, using 4 to 5 setting sprays throughout my, or sprays throughout my routine is also extra, but I do use 2 at the very end. I start out with the Makeup Revolution Super Fix Super Hold Setting Mist. Spray that all over my face, let it dry, and then I go in with a little bit of the Milani Make It Last just to further lock everything in. This combo right here is what is going to keep my makeup on all day long. So I'm gonna go finish out the rest of my makeup and I will be right back. But yeah, this is the final look. I'm gonna bring you guys in real close for just one second. Hey. So, as you can see, I just have to look up to be able to even see if I'm in focus. But as you guys can see, I still have texture on my skin. Like, I still have pores. Still got my little forehead wrinkles and, I have texture on my skin. But my skin looks like skin, despite being fully set down with powder and, having everything on there. But that is what it looks like close up, so that everyone can remember that skin has texture and, is never as perfect as it looks from a distance and with filming lights and all of that. But that's gonna wrap up today's video. comment down below and let me know the last time you changed your base routine or changed some part of your makeup routine for the better, or just the last time you experimented with something new. Comment down below, tell me. Please subscribe if you have not already. It would mean the world to me. Like this video, ring the bell, do all the things. I hope that you guys have an awesome day. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!